Cool. Thank you everyone for joining today. So we can go ahead and get started now. So I'm Dylan Roberts. I'm a solutions architect here at Decisions. So to start off today, we actually have one pre-submitted question. So let me get that real quick. Find it. So the question was, can we add a training video link on a dashboard? So, and then the second part of the question is there a way to display data repeater fields on a report? So I'll start with the first question of, can we add a training video link onto a dashboard? And the answer is yes. And I'll go over a couple of ways we can do that. So for this example, I'm just going to use a couple of different YouTube videos from our decisions page. So the first way to add one onto a report is by using an open URL component. This component is kind of static. It lets you specify a URL you would want to call, and you could change the text on it to say the training video or whatever the context would be around this. And you can also change the button type, whether it's a link, a button, a secondary button, a primary button. We'll just stick with link. So if we save this, go over here, refresh our page, you can see there's now a link. And if we click it, it'll open up the YouTube video in a pop-up. So there's also one more setting on this that will allow you to open it in a new tab. So by clicking this, save it real quick, you'll be able to open up that training video in a new tab. So this is one way to go about this. The second way is kind of by building a library of training videos. Let's say you have many training videos you'd want to display. You can build a database structure or some sort of structure in Decisions that contains a name of the video and a link to the video. So for example, I put together the spreadsheet with two tabs. I created a structure in Decisions that holds a name and it holds a link. So with this, you can build a report that will allow you to navigate to these videos and display this onto a dashboard. So I'll show that real quick. So I already created a couple of records on it, but we will just use a report viewer to achieve this. And I will show the report. So if we pick an existing, go here, save this real quick. And let's edit this report. So what I included on here was a couple of things. So the first one's just the basic video name field. The next one is the actual video link, which I included on here, but I made it not visible. And the reason I did that was for this third one right here. I'll kind of rebuild this. It's a calculated column which allows you to open a URL. This calculated column is called, let me find it, open URL inline field. What you'll be able to do is specify your URL. So in this case, we've had it specified from our data structure. So we can go ahead right here and just choose the video link. We'll save this and then we'll give it a display text. So this would be whatever you want the report to show. This for this, we'll just put open video. But you could customize this to open like training video or open something different. So let's go ahead and save this. Close and save. Let's go view this on our page. So you can see here we'll have our video name and then our tab. If we click on it, it'll open up the video in a new tab for us and play it. Of course, one thing I forgot to do is rename that column. So I'll just go ahead and do that. When you choose a calculated column, it's going to choose set that as the name. So just remember renaming the titles might be beneficial here. So video link, just make it look a little bit nicer. But this way, it's a little bit more scalable. It's not a static URL you're always hitting. You can add, remove, And it's a quick way to build a video library for training videos. So those are two ways I would approach this. Now for the second part of the question, is there a way to display data repeater fields on a report? This one's a little tough for me to answer. I was wondering if whoever asked that question could provide a little bit more context to that one.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for answering the first question. For the second one, I just have a data repeater with like total quantity, and I wanted to see if there's any way like I can just show the total on the report, like because I tried to add the whole data structure, but it was just like it was adding the whole data structure. Is there any way
I
to add
see.
like an individual field?
Yeah, let's kind of work through that. So there might be, I think for that, you would just want like a number of like maybe total records or something on there.
I wanted like an individual field. So on the data repeater, I have like 5 fields, and I wanted to show 3 of those fields on the report.
Okay. Let's think. So you mean, let's say here we have 5 attributes. You just want to display 3, but you would also want a count or something like that? I'm sorry if I'm not following.
So when I go on my report, I see my data repeaters, but it's a whole data structure.
Oh,
I just want like specific fields out of it, not the whole data structure.
I see. So like when you're building a report, you don't want to be able to see all of your possible columns on a structure?
Actually, I'm just looking at right now. It doesn't even show my data repeaters data structure on the report. Oh, But is there any way like to show data repeaters on the report, like
So there's
just
not
general?
specifically, no, because it's so a data repeater is based off of some type you can define. So you might have a flow structure that's supporting that and mapping it in from another. So there's not a specific way to display that on a report.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. But now, like, let's say if the reason for a data repeater, you're having let's say a calculated column, like you're trying to get a date time difference or something between 2 fields on your source, that's when you can start to look in calculated columns. And there's a couple of things that you could use for that. So like if you wanted to get total count between 2 fields on your structure, you could use a calculated column for that. But I don't think there is a way to display kind of the repeater on the report.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was the only pre-submitted question. Are there any questions? Any other questions that you guys would like to cover? Let's see. If not, we still have a couple more minutes. I can go over one topic if you guys would like, and it would be how to extend actions onto an external database table. It could be useful, it could not be to some people. I've come across it a few times now. But the use case in this scenario would be, we have a report sourced on an external database table or a query that in an external database that we're sourcing our report from. We would want to be able to include actions, kind of like how case entities have within decisions or any database structure. They would want that same sort of pattern. So to achieve that, you would want to use something on a report called override action context. So I'm going to drop in the chat a link to our documentation because it's really good on this topic, but I'll kind of walk through what it looks like as well. So I just posted a link within the chat, but what this would do is, for instance, on my local database, I have a table called persons. It's a very weird name for a table, but it just has a person ID, last name, first name, and age. So from this table, I want to create actions on my report to maybe update it or delete it from my external database. So to do that, for one, there's kind of two ways to approach it. The way I wanted to go about it in this scenario is that I am sourcing my report from a query. So if I go here and I'm using a query sourced report, and I just specified use my external database and just select all records from my persons table. In order for me to get actions onto this, out of the box, I wouldn't have it. So this is where the overriding context comes from. So there's a checkbox here on the properties panel of your report. Under settings, it's called actions. So you would click this override action context box and it'll let you choose the type. So for this specific use case, I created my own type and decisions to set actions on, and it was an external entity. So an external entity is a real good use case for this because it allows you to extend actions onto something outside of decisions, external to decisions. So let me show you what an external entity looks like real quick, because it's slightly different. So when you create a normal entity in decisions, you'll get a configuration folder. When you create an external entity, it follows that same pattern. However, you'll see some predefined flows that you would want to configure. So for this specific use case, I set up 3 of these flows. One would be get an ID from entity, fetch, and then fetch all. So what you would want to do in this get ID is specify for my external entity, which field on this object is going to be my primary ID field. So in this case, I made an external entity with the exact fields from my table, the same name and everything. So I said, for this case, I want it to be person ID. Next thing you'd want to do is set up a fetch. So since you're going to override it, if you give this flow the ID, how does it get the record into the flow for you? So in this case, I just used the raw SQL step. There's many ways around this. This was just to quickly put together, but it was just fetching the record by ID from my external table. And then there's one more flow that isn't really relevant to here. You need to set it up, I believe, initially. And this is what happens if you report on an external entity. This is what will source it. So here you can use just a select all from your table. In this case, I returned just the top result because I'm not really reporting on this entire table through an external entity. I'm reporting on it through my query. So I'm just returning the top result. But by doing this, I created an action called show popup. So now let's go back to this report. So when I specified my action context, you specify what do you want to relate it to? And that in this case was the external entity I just went over. The next part you would set up on this is your context ID field. So this is telling decisions which field from your report that we're currently on do you want to relate to your external entity. In this case, I wanted person ID because that's my primary key. So by doing this, I'm able to relate my raw query to my external entity. And now when I run this, I will be able to have the show pop-up action or whatever actions I add on to that external entity in here. So I see there is a question, can you create actions on flow structures? The answer is, I don't believe you can. You can create them on database structures, but I don't believe flow structures because that's really just a way to pass data throughout your workflow. But if you were to do it on a database structure, there's a button here, enable actions, which will create that configuration folder for you. Okay, so that, I know it was really quick. I went through that. It was just wanted to give a high level overview. The documentation is really good on this. So if you come across this scenario, I would definitely recommend giving that a review. Let's see. So how would I create an action if my report data source is a flow? Good question. So for that, if you do have a data sourced flow, I believe I would go with an external entity actually, and kind of follow the same pattern I just went over with the override action context. So the reason for that is because it's not an actual structure and decision. So you wouldn't be able to have your configuration folder tied to it, but kind of going over that pattern I just showed where you have an external entity, you would be able to relate it that way and add actions to it. So hopefully that helped out a little bit. Are there any other questions? If there aren't, I think we can call it a day. So thanks for joining. Oh, let's see. Okay, one more. Let's say I would like to merge data from different sources like APIs. How can I act on those? So do you mean when reporting on it as well? So you'd want to report on multiple. Okay, so that's kind of the same pattern again. Let me try to build this real quick because it's been a little bit since I've looked at it. But let's say you'd want a flow source report because that's how you're gathering all of your data. So let's just go through this. Actually, first, let me build a flow real quick. Create a flow. Let me see. Which one is it? It's been a little bit since I've built this. It's not report line. Here it is, report data source flow. Okay, so I'm just gonna build a report basically on my external table. So yeah. I'll just say APIs. In this case, I'll just kind of mimic what it looks like. So here, I don't want specific input, but that's where you would set it. Let me just do a SQL. Let me just put this in real quick. Return data. Select persons, external truth table. Don't use current connection, use an external database. Let me just test this real quick. Cool. So what I want to output here is a list of persons. Yeah, so I see your question. I use a flow to source the report, flow structures the output. Then there's an API to update the case. You'd like to create an action on that report based off of it. Yeah, so we'll follow this pattern. So this is just going, I'm just gonna quickly set this up to external entity. Let me just is a list. Okay, so let me just go build a report on this real quick. Report. Source. Where is it? What did I just name it? So you get data from APIs. Okay, going to add our first name now, last name, ID, age. So this would be kind of like how you have it. You have your APIs, you're populating this report. So this is where you'd want somehow to create this override action. So what I would recommend here is kind of the pattern of creating an external entity. So that external entity is what you'll define your actions on. So kind of like before, let me see. You would create an external entity. You can have, it doesn't have to have all the fields. I mean, it could just have some primary key fields you need on this. But what you would want to define, depending on the data you need, I think it's easiest and makes the most sense when you kind of make them one-to-one. So your external entity would be like this, the person's configuration, the one-to-one, and you'd have to set up these flows. So the first one would be your ID. You choose what's your ID field from your flow source report. Second one would be your fetch, and then your fetch all. So once you set those up, that's when you would choose your external entity as your override context. So if I go with my, let's see. Here, and I would say I want my person ID to be the override context. So now, since I already had that external entity set up, if I run this, let's see, I'm able to now see the actions that were tied to that external entity. Yep, I see someone raise their hand. Yep, do you have a question?
Hey, Dylan, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I have a project that's built out, that's live, that people are using, and I need to make some fairly major changes to the flows and forms and things within that project. And it would certainly interrupt in-process workflows. Is there a way to, I guess, create another version of a project in production? Like if I export it and then import, it's going to override everything that's there. But how would I make a brand new project? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So kind of two ways. Do you happen to use the repository?
I don't know.
Okay, because the repository would be one method of checking in and checking out to your. So when you make your promotions, I'm guessing you just do a kind of like a manual export of your project.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a really good question. I'm not sure the best approach to that. What I'm thinking is you would have to almost rename what's kind of like on your dev server, rename that project,
Okay.
and then check that in. But I would actually submit a support ticket to verify that.
Okay.
If you are using the repository, I would recommend cutting a branch of the project. What that would do is essentially create a copy of your project at the time. So you could have what your dev version, your dev branch, or what's in prod at that time. And then if you were to create a new branch, it'd be essentially a copy with your changes.
Okay.
But I would recommend submitting a support ticket just to double check the best process on that.
Okay. Awesome. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. Take care.
Okay, are there any more questions? Let's see, can I use advanced text box to force someone to input their number in this format without validation? Ooh, that's a great question, actually. I believe there is a way. Let me see, I haven't personally done it, but I've seen it before. Let me try to answer this one for you. So let's see. So I believe that you'd want to use a masked text box here. And yeah, so I think there's there's actually a defaulted phone number. Let me put a button on here. Done. Let's see. So if we put phone number, let's see if we run this in the flow, what it looks like. So I'm just going to ignore it. Let's. Okay, so yeah, it will enforce it to be put into that format with the mask text box. So are there any other questions? Not sure I'm following with your second part. Okay, I don't know if we could remove them. Let me think. So that's default. Let's see. There might be a way to style that with CSS. Let me see real quick though. If we do something custom, I think you could then just put in a regex statement. I'm not sure off the top of my head what that would look like, but you could then enforce it to be in that format. So I would still use the same component, but just build a custom regex to fit that. And that would remove the parentheses then. Yeah, so if it will just validate, I'm not sure then the best way. Those are the two ways I would approach it. You might be able to, I'm not sure how to get it without validation. Yeah, actually I haven't come across that before, so I'm not sure on the best answer to that one. I'm sorry. Yeah, so yeah, I think it will just format it in that by default. We could test it real quick, but I'm pretty sure you're spot on with that. It's just going to default it. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yep, because it will default it with those parentheses for you. Let me see real quick. What other options? Let me just think real quick. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not exactly sure the best way to approach that. I would try with the regex. Maybe there's a way to not have it validate. I don't think so though. So I don't know if there's another component that would help with the non-validation or remove those parentheses. I mean, what you could do is if you wanted it enforced, you could just put a cut, like a trim string step within your workflow to remove those parentheses. That would work. And what that would look like. So let's see which field we could use and just test this real quick, because this might be a pretty quick fix. It could be like strip characters or. Let's see. Characters to strip. Let's build. I haven't personally used that step, but I think there would be a way to go forward with that. I think you could just use some of the data text manipulation steps to trim that string to fit that. I think that should work. I'm not sure what this is looking for. Let's see. Let's try one thing because I personally haven't used this step before. So if I put that, what will it do? Oh, there we go. Okay, so that will work then. You can use a strip character step to format it. And if you need the dash, you could do another text manipulation to put it after the third index of the string. Okay, is there anything else? Okay. If not, I think we can call it a day. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.